there, friends, and welcome back to this Life Without Limits. I'm your host, Weston McWhorter, and on today's episode, I'm joined by investor, entrepreneur, event promoter, community creator, spiritual seeker, and overall rad dad, Chris Schultz. Chris and I met in New Orleans while we were both deeply integrated in the post-Hurricane Katrina entrepreneurial wave. Chris's startup incubator, LaunchPad, helped several early-stage businesses come to market by providing capital, mentorship, and networking opportunities for growth to founders of all types. He also played a pivotal role in the Collision Conference, TribeCon, LaunchFest, and many other events at the intersection of technology, community, and entertainment. Now making his home in Northern California, Chris and his wife Ann have launched a nascent music festival called Cosmico Fest, which has one event in Todos Santos, Mexico, and the other in Healdsburg, California, with the stated mission of building community and love through incredible musical experiences. You may say that creating community is in Chris's blood, and you'd be right. It's one of the things I enjoy most about this guy. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Chris, and let's get into it. All right, everybody. I just want to welcome my good friend, Chris Schultz, to this Life Without Limits. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. It's great to be back with you, Wes.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I don't think we've seen each other. I mean, you moved out of New Orleans well before I did, huh? When did you jump up to California?
I moved out here. I had, some couple of years of life transition, but about between 2013 and 2015, I was making the move from New Orleans to the Bay Area to San Francisco initially, and now I'm in Healdsburg, California, up in Northern California.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Well, I was telling you before we hit the record button that it looks like a beautiful day out there for sure.
It's a beautiful sunny day, and I'm sitting in a redwood grove. I'm trying to describe it since people will be listening on audio. But surrounded by all these old growth redwood trees, and they were here long before we got here, and they'll be here long after we're here. So I feel like I'm just stewarding this special spot for a little while.
Yeah, beautiful, man. Beautiful. Well, there's so much that we can catch up on. And what I thought we could chat about today is, kind of your journey in the entrepreneurship space. Kind of curious about, hearing the story around how you kind of got into that world originally and sort of where you and I met back in New Orleans. And then, what took you out to the Bay Area and what you're up to now, because there's a lot of exciting stuff. And I mentioned to you before we got on that I have this running list of people that I want to have on the podcast. It's like 100 people on this thing. And you've been on the list like from the beginning. And it just feels really good to be watching what's going on in your life just kind of from afar. And I was actually like inspired to make the commitment to reach out to you after I got your new newsletter that you were sending out. And so I'd love to talk about that, about your book, about your music festivals, all that stuff, man. 'Cause I know you get a lot of balls, your family. I mean, I know you get a lot of balls in the air. So
always a lot of balls in the air. But everything you touched on are things that I'm doing right now and things we can get into today.
Yeah.
But to sort of back up and, the start of the question about entrepreneurship,
Sure.
That's been, for me, one of the sort of defining factors of my life, has been both being an entrepreneur myself and, encouraging, enabling, sometimes poking and prodding other people into this path of entrepreneurship. And the core for me has been and always was about agency, having as much control in my life of how I spend my time, what I'm working on, what I'm focused on. And for me, entrepreneurship has just been this incredible life's journey to having agency in my life, being able to live the life that I want to live every day. And as we continually reinvent ourselves, it's interesting reconnecting now and being on this podcast with you, because I think I have been in a taking stock kind of phase chapter of my life, and a bit of a reemergence. And that probably aligns with what many of us have been through over the last few years, going through COVID and a pause, and just when your day-to-day routine just stops, which literally everybody had globally. It's hard, you can't stop but take stock. And so we've sort of been in this phase, and like, am I really on the path I want to be on, and where do I want to go from here? And that's been a fun phase of sort of reconnecting with self during that phase.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And so when we met several years ago, I mean, it was probably in 2008 or 9, where you had started LaunchPad, like kind of in the wake of Katrina, right? I mean, was that around that time?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And for me, Katrina, going through Katrina in New Orleans, for those of us who were or are New Orleanians, I think we'll forever be New Orleanians, but we're there during that time. That was one of these, taking stock moments. The city was brought to its knees. The city was literally completely evacuated, for the most part, and the people who came back were sort of a coalition of the willing, the people who wanted to rebuild New Orleans and take it to new heights, for what we wanted to do with the city. So during that time, I sort of found my voice, and that of sort of being a champion of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs, and started a co-working space called LaunchPad. And we sort of called ourselves the Ellis Island of the New Orleans tech community. If you wanted to do something in entrepreneurship and startups, you probably crossed through LaunchPad stores at one point or another. And that was a great journey. But I think, again, back to this whole sort of what we've been through the last few years, we who went through Katrina in New Orleans, and other people who've been through natural disasters or other types of moments like that, there's this, very difficult part, but and for meeting with a community and helping to build community. And I think we're seeing some of that beginning to come out of COVID now too.
Yeah, beautiful, man. And I think you really hit the nail on the head that, like, there's these moments in our lives when we're met with crisis, whether it's self-inflicted or not, and being able to navigate those situations thoughtfully and, with as much wisdom as you have in the moment is, really kind of like makes all the difference between whether you flame out, right? Or you emerge in a more like embodied, present, educated way. And yeah, I mean, I would say that certainly, like, I was not there for Katrina, but I came like essentially 12 months later. So seeing all of that, vibrant energy in that community, well, in the community period, but certainly within, like, the folks that were really trying to shepherd in, I think, a diversified economy, something that wasn't so focused on oil and gas and hospitality and tourism and things like that, was really inspiring to just have access to, to see everything that was happening. And so, like, with LaunchPad, what was there a specific type of company that sort of fit in the sweet spot there for you guys, or was it just kind of like anybody that had an idea could come in and kind of incubate it in that space?
I think that entrepreneurship is a path for anyone who chooses it, and there is no right type of a business to start. And so from the get-go, for us, one of our core values was diverse and inclusive, not exclusive. So we certainly had a lot of tech companies and startups and companies that were focused in that sort of part of entrepreneurship, but that's only, one part of entrepreneurship. And I think people who are starting, small businesses, lifestyle businesses, all types of paths, to me are valid. And we made an effort to really support whatever anybody wanted to do, that, created agency in their lives and was a business they wanted to start.
Yeah, for sure, man. And I mean, I know that there's been, a lot of advice that's out there given to, like, young people that are looking to start businesses. I mean, and I guess maybe my one question would be, like, when someone comes to you and says, they've got this idea that they're thinking about putting together for a business, like, what are some of the things that go through your mind, just from like a mentorship standpoint, that you kind of advise them on?
It's a great question, and a question I think, I try to answer as directly and helpfully as possible. So a couple words of advice. One would be, sit with it, sit with that idea, see if it, still sort of speaks to you, the next day, a week later, months later. If it's one of those things that does, then that's a very good sign. If it's something that sort of passes and you thought, okay, this is something that I got excited about, but I get back to my life and sort of forget about, that's a message as well. Because the entrepreneurial journey is one of, a story of just a few chapters in your life. To really do something, commit to something, and you've done this, I've done this, we have plenty of friends. It's a full chapter of your life. You've got to be ready to dedicate 10 years to something. It's not just just a few weeks, a project that might take you 6 months. It's a full chapter of your life. So be ready to fully commit to that. I also believe strongly in de-risking something as much as possible before jumping into it. So whether that means doing something at night or on weekends or as a side hustle, and seeing if you can actually get some traction, talking to customers, trying to sell something to customers, trying to get your business off the ground without having it require, sort of you to be able to make a living doing it, is a great way to transition into entrepreneurship. Maybe not leave your job, maybe work on something for a while you're seeing if you can make it work. Because one of the hardest things, but also very empowering things, is getting to the point where you truly are making a living doing what you want to do, building a business. And that almost never happens overnight. I've had a lot of entrepreneurs I've talked to that talk about raising funding and getting a salary, and they're focused. If you come from the framework of sort of having a job, you're thinking, okay, when do I get paid? I've got my mortgage, I've got my monthly bills. Often when you're starting a company, that might take 6 months, that might take a year, it may never come. So you have to sort of be prepared for that part of it. And then the third sort of piece of advice is think about the business that you really want to build. I think I use this term, the VC industrial complex. There's a lot of media about entrepreneurship out there, which sort of gives us a framework of, we're going to have VCs, throwing money at us, and we're going to raise big money, and this is going to be $1 billion company. And a lot of entrepreneurs initially sort of put themselves into, okay, that's the path. And it might be the path for you, but that also is going to require, 100-hour weeks. And that's going to require, eventually you're going to have a company of 500 or 1,000 employees. And do you really want to do that? I know for me, I've never had it in me to manage that many people, to really, to build that type of business. So all paths are valid. Understand, is this a lifestyle business, a small business that that really the best way to get it going is to go get customers and get some revenue, not to focus on, trying to raise capital, and understand sort of where your business fits in that spectrum, I think is really critical as well.
Yeah, man. I'm curious, because I had, well, this question relates to somebody I had on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. You remember Neil Suss, right? Of course.
Sure, of course. Yeah.
So as you're telling, offering these wisdom tidbits, what I'm thinking of is like, Neil's one of those guys who, started a company. It was starting to get successful. And, part of his story was that his health and his relationship, like in his family, became really compromised during the course, like the early years, and I reached out to Neil because, he's another guy whose personal transformation has been incredible to watch over the last couple of years, and so I guess what I'm interested in, and I can also even offer my own part, was thinking that like when I started Relay, I had done like kind of what you're describing, that de-risking part of it. I spent a couple of years being like a mobile mechanic and, working on people's bikes at home and really trying to like build a community behind that brand that could support it, because I had this idea to like create a space, like a real like branded sort of environment for people to visit and hang out in. But speaking solely for myself, I was way off track on the personal growth and like reflection side of things, and so and I think that relates a little bit to some of the struggles that Neil had. And for me, unfortunately, I didn't jump on that path until everything kind of like came unwound at Relay, and it was like one of those oh shit kind of moments, like I really need to go and kind of like renovate what's going on inside of me. So I'm curious, like, because you've been in this world for so long, how important is that self-awareness or that self-inquiry in these young founders, right? Because this isn't stuff that we're ever taught, dude. It's almost like we almost, I was going to say we fail our way into that sort of awakening place, and maybe that's accurate. But I guess I'm just curious, like how big of a part do you think that plays in, the overall, any idea can fail, but I'm just curious about like, the more potential for success of somebody that has a practice of like deeply knowing who they are and what they're looking for, what their vision is in life.
I think it's critical, and it's not that having that practice and that awareness, necessarily will make you successful, but I think that not having that practice and that awareness is something that holds people back. And Neil's amazing, and his transformation has been amazing, and his commitment. A practice means you're doing it day after day. I mean, he wakes up and goes and works out at 4:30 in the morning every day. It's amazing. But that's a practice. That's the commitment to the ongoing work that we need to do on ourselves. And Relay was amazing. I mean, what you created, what you imagined, the brand, the essence of what brought people in. I have a similar story. I mean, I left New Orleans with my life, pretty scrambled up. I don't want to say it was in shambles, but I went through a divorce. And did not have my way of showing up in a marriage in integrity. I was not being the husband and the man that I wanted to be, that I was proud of, and that I needed to be. I had a divorce of business partners with my business partners within LaunchPad. And so I similar to a lot of entrepreneurs, I speak from not taking my own advice. I, had these personal guarantees on real estate that, really were financially very scary. And then the first LaunchPad expansion that we went to in Charleston, South Carolina, began to fail. And, I felt like it could have meant financial ruin for me. And so I had deep anxiety, and, I after divorce, after, just dealing with all this anxiety, I didn't know where to turn.
Yeah.
And, therein found a meditation practice as a first step to calming my mind, being able to just sleep at night, just get some sleep. And, that slowly but surely sort of led me to, a spiritual journey, which we can get into, as well as just a, much healthier lifestyle.
Yeah.
Not, understanding that, drinking and enjoying a New Orleans lifestyle can be fun. It doesn't mean, you have to abstain, but bringing aspects of your life into, into your own awareness of what's healthy and what's not for where you are, exercise, all of those things. But I think you're absolutely right that one way or another, most of us are going to get to that journey, or that sort of, that kind of recognition of I've got to really deeply understand myself and who I am and what my needs are and how I take care of myself. And that is probably the best preparation you can have for whatever journey it is, whether it's entrepreneurship or not. Just being as evolved a person as you can in your life.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think it's so important. And I mean, I guess I wish that that there was, I guess I would just call it like a entrepreneurial, like spiritual support group in some ways, right? Maybe there are out there, and I haven't done enough Google searches for it, but it does seem like, entrepreneurship is such a beautiful vehicle for creative expression, and yes, like, living life on your terms with agency, bringing new ideas out into the world, and as like it can definitely break you if you're not like, if you don't have like the inner resources to sort of metabolize all the stress and anxiety and like heavy decisions you got to make, and you brought up that sort of like spiritual awakening piece for you, and I am curious about that. I think that stuff is fascinating, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, so my journey to sort of, like I said, a spiritual awakening has happened, relatively, recently in my life, in the last 2 or 3 years. It was, during COVID that a good friend came and stayed with us, and he said, "Look, I'm seeing this hippie therapist. You might want to, I was very intrigued by it, and it turns out, and I see him over Zoom, and he's a shaman, and has sort of taken, both my wife and I are see him and work with him, and over the last few years, I found myself just devouring all of this, reading and sort of, practices and meditation practices, and just the way we've oriented our lives, feeling much more centered. Certainly, understanding, it aligns with, the period of COVID. It also aligns with us having a daughter, moving up to Northern California. So there's sort of a confluence of all sorts of things. And for me, it was a void. My father was a preacher, and
wow.
Yeah, so my father was a Presbyterian minister, and my father was my hero. He died 17 years ago now, so he died a young man, relatively young. He died at 63, but this was before he even got a chance to retire. He's still the CEO of a company, and takes a sick leave to fight cancer and loses the battle. And so that was a huge loss. And so there was always this, why haven't I grasped traditional religion? It just isn't. I never wanted to fake it. I didn't want to just go sit in a church pew every Sunday and sort of phone it in, so to speak. But it was an area of my life that was not being developed. I was not focusing on, and I think you think about the physical, mental, spiritual bodies that we all have. It's something you can neglect when you focus on, okay, I need to work out, I need to eat right, I need to kind of focus at work and accomplish things, and I'm ambitious, but there's an area of your life that is sort of underdeveloped, and it was certainly underdeveloped for me, and something that I've been enjoying, frankly. Just like religion, like that's sort of what I mean. Like it wasn't ever fun for me. I wasn't really into the path that my father walked. And now it is. It's just I find it so insightful. Where I am in life now.
Yeah, that's beautiful, man. And I think that, so I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, and had a very similar experience, essentially like my entire childhood and kind of young adulthood. And that feeling of like, not being necessarily connected, like deeply connected to what was being talked about, was something that I really felt. And yet, when I look back on my journals from like my 20s, I was in there writing down like Thich Nhat Hanh quotes and like Buddhist quotes, and things like that, where, I was still very curious about all that's out there, the full spectrum of, the spiritual experience, and for me, like the way that I work with my coaching clients is really, because a lot, I think the typical model is like, okay, like here's 30 days to flat abs, or 90 days to your first $1 million, and it's like, okay, well, like that's cool. And the place I like to start is like what do you actually believe? Like what are your values? What are things that what's that great beyond that really calls you to a higher purpose? Because from that place you can start to layer on you can layer on things that support that inner world of yours, and also perhaps most importantly, you can begin to like discern like what needs to come out, right? Like what needs to not be there anymore. Like, do I need to be out at the bar every weekend socializing and drinking? Maybe, maybe not, but it's certainly, I mean, if you have that sort of inner knowing, it's like you can kind of gauge a little better, like what serves you and what doesn't serve you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I also think that one of the things that that I've been through is understanding yourself as you relate to other people. And I think the one of the things that was sort of a burden I carried was being a codependent, and having a particular just sort of habit or pattern, and you only recognize a pattern after it's occurred a couple times, but of sort of having a narcissistic codependent relationship show up in my life, and feeling like, why am I drawn into that? You sort of recognize I don't don't like the way I feel when I'm interacting with this person or afterwards, or, that it isn't serving me, to use your
Yeah.
words. It's not like, it's not a healthy relationship. So part of that journey, the inner journey of building your own awareness of yourself, is, sort of healing. For me, there was a sort of a not enoughness, or this thing that would be tapped into by relationships that weren't necessarily healthy for me. And you don't have to, like, get along with everybody or have everybody in your life. That was one of the things that
Surprise, yeah.
me, like, surprise. Like, there are some people that maybe, hey, you shouldn't be a partner with, or a business partner with, or in a relationship with. It's not healthy for you. So I think that's also, like, your awareness about yourself, and then also understanding yourself as you relate to other people, and who are the people you want to have in your life, and who are the people you want to, have those interactions and those relationships with.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a really beautiful way of saying that. And I had this insight that I was sharing with some of my guys recently, that there is this tendency, I mean, at least for me, there's this tendency that to believe that everybody likes me, right? Like, I'm a likable guy, I'm fun at parties, like why doesn't everybody like me, right? And it took me most of my life to realize that, like, oh, like, I'm not actually for everybody, like, that's okay. And not everybody is for me either, which sort of brings us back to, talking about community and the importance of community and building community. And for me, that's been critical to, like, find my people, and find that tribe of individuals that I, not only do I love and support and want to, like, lift up and elevate, but who also want to do the same thing for me, and I think you've done that really, really beautifully, man. And I want to kind of, like, slide over into this subject, because it's something that I think is just really dope that you're into. But you're producing music festivals now, right? Which I think is, frankly, like, one of the most cool ways to, like, build community.
I do too. I mean, that's why I'm doing it. That's like literally why my wife Ann and I are doing it. We were in, as the conference world.
Mm-hmm.
I started out in New Orleans, trying to sort of replicate the South by Southwest model,
Mm-hmm.
which
Mm-hmm.
been so many people have tried to do this. South by is awesome because it's South by. I don't know if it's replicable, but we did these conferences with the New Orleans thing that we do great in New Orleans, which was music festivals, and with Jazz Fest and Voodoo Music Festival at the time. We'll see if that comes back.
Oh yeah.
But I latched a tech conference onto both of those, and that was really, like you said, about building community, trying to bring an awareness to what was going on in the entrepreneurial scene in New Orleans, rather than having to go travel to conferences to see these amazing speakers. We would bring people to us, and we had Perry Chen, founder of Kickstarter. We had Ryan Graves, who was actually the original CEO of Uber before Travis, came and spoke at TribeCon. And then eventually all of that led to LaunchFest, sort of got rolled into the Collision Conference. The Collision Conference was in New Orleans for a couple of years, and then opted to leave and go to Toronto. And by this time I had left New Orleans. But this has been something that has sort of tugged at me these last few years, and particularly during COVID. I want to get my people together. I want to be around people. And so we during COVID, discovered this town. We're new discoverers. It's been discovered, and been people there, but a town called Todos Santos in Mexico on the Baja Peninsula, and went down there for a period of time, for a month or so during COVID, and then ended up buying a place down there. And that one thing led to another, and we invested in a music festival.
Yeah.
And this music festival had come off of 2 years of operating during COVID, and so it was, had been a pretty rough run of it. And, so picked it up and sort of helped out, and called Tropic of Cancer. That happens in January. And then through this period had also been doing music in our backyard, and like I said, this redwood grove, and we have a creek down here, and we built a stage in the backyard, and we're having bands on a regular basis. And this past year opened that up and did a public ticketed show, and also the backyard shows. So this has been sort of growing organically, and we're having a lot of fun doing these two festivals, Tropic of Cancer and Cosmico Fest, and began to sort of, okay, what are we doing here? We're doing more. Why are we doing this? Why are we trying to bring people together? I mean, I love music as much as anybody that has spent time in New Orleans, or if you have a passion for music, and I love seeing seeing live music and experiencing live music, and I think we all were craving that when we couldn't do that during COVID. But it's more than that, and I over the last year have sort of understood, or tried to understand why we are being drawn to this. And for me, it's that music and seeing music, experiencing music, is one of those things that sort of breaks you open-hearted. It's like your vulnerability comes out, you feel moved, and so music can provide so much healing. Music is a wonderful expression of love, just like people who love cooking for each other, and food can be love. Music is a wonderful expression of love. And so for us, Cosmico Fest in particular has become really an effort to bring people together, to have a shared experience around music, but really to sort of acknowledge in that environment what we all go through in our day-to-day lives, and sometimes feel very, very disconnected around. And it just is, it's really building community, bringing people together. And for us here in Healdsburg, it's been a way for us to be contributors to the local community. We're not winemakers, and so there's a lot of winemakers around. There's a lot of farmers around. There's a lot of other things, but this was something that we could do and kind of contribute to the community. So it's been a fun sort of expression of building community through something that we really love, which is music.
It's so incredible, man. I mean, I have a past in my life where I was a rock and roll musician and tried, to, do that whole thing for several years. And literally, I mean, I really enjoyed like public performance. Like, it was one of my favorite things. Right. But my favorite thing that I did was, for my birthday every year, I would get all of my favorite bands together and do a show at like CBGB's or something. This is when I was living up in New York. And Chris, I tell you, like, I mean, that's it exactly, right? Like gathering all of your friends into a place, having this shared experience. Everybody's there just to celebrate and love and like, appreciate each other's creative talents. And yeah, man, I mean, I think music is such a beautiful Trojan horse for like societal change, for like really elevating like people's connection to themselves, to each other. And I mean, it seems pretty self-evident when you look at like, photographs from Jazz Fest or Voodoo Fest, these big seas of people just rocking out to Stevie Wonder or fill in the blank, Big Frida, right? And so I just think that's really cool, man. I mean, so what's it's Cosmic Fest, is that what it's called?
Cosmico with an O,
Cosmico.
Cosmico Fest. Yeah.
Yeah. What's
And
the vision for that? Like where are you guys thinking you want to take it? That's an
well, it's
entrepreneurial
interesting.
question for you.
That's an entrepreneurial question. I mean, I think we are growing it and trying to make it truly sustainable. A big risk with music festivals or anything else like this or a big contemplation is not taking too much risk.
Sure.
Growing it organically in a way that we can do it. And so it's grown every year. We are beginning to think about doing Cosmico Fests in multiple locations.
Yeah.
I would love to have an opportunity to come back to New Orleans and do something, although New Orleans has no lack of festivals
Sure.
and music.
Well, I know a great farm in Maryland that if you're interested, man, that's not too far from where I live now.
Oh, really? That would be cool, because one of the things that we're actually looking at for next year is what we're calling Camp Cosmico, which is an experience of going out to, this would not be here at our house, but a redwood grove that is a former Boy Scout camp, and sort of programming for people who love music, but also people who have families. And so programming sort of camp activities, having bands playing at night, having great food, great wine, all of the experience. But yeah, maybe Maryland could be we'd hop over and do something there.
Dude, I'm just excited by just the prospect of everything that you have, like the vision for the festival. It sounds incredible, man.
It's really cool, and it was, it's one of those things that I don't know if this is like, end state entrepreneurship for me, but as LaunchPad was winding down, and we're still in the process of winding it down, but LaunchPad, the end net was COVID hit. People didn't want to work in a co-working space, couldn't work in a co-working space. Most of our spaces have transitioned. They're open, but they've transitioned either back to the landlord or to a new operator. So it became one of those questions about what's next. And there was truly soul searching about what do I really want to do? What would be fun, engaging, something that really, not, and the whole process of where we started the call, like it stuck with me. I kept sort of wanting to do this, and so yeah, I feel like it's an expression of something that's been with me and that I really truly love. And we'll see where it goes, but yeah, we're having fun doing the music festival thing.
Yeah, that's killer, man. I mean, it's as you're sort of passing through this, middle passage of life, bro, like there's so much wisdom that's been gained in these experiences. And I'm, like I said, when I got your flow state email a month or so ago, that's what, kind of pricked up my, my intuition to reach back out to you again. And so I am curious about like, about flow state, about the book that I understand that you have kind of in progress, and what's the nature of what you're trying to communicate through not only the blog and the email communication, the Substack, but also in the book that you're working on.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that a little bit. And to be honest, this is the first I've talked about it. So you're
Cool,
hearing
man.
it here first.
Yay.
And I'm excited to be sharing it with you.
Yeah.
This is all me finding my voice, so to speak. Finding, just like business do I want to run? What do I want to say? What do I truly want to say? Not just marketing messages and sort of writing a newsletter, email newsletter, but like what truth do I want to speak?
Yeah.
And so the book is about what I believe have been important building blocks of my life. And the book is called Analog. And the analog is my analog to my father's journey, me thinking about my father's path and measuring myself against his path, or just trying to live up to his path, which is an expectation that I think many of us set for ourselves with our parents or other loved ones, people we respect. And so there's three things that my life's journey has sort of brought to light for me, and those are agency, joy, and meaning. And so the three sections of the book are about entrepreneurship as a path to creating agency in one's life, and the lessons along my journey that I've learned. The next is the importance of joy, and I think that this is a message that we all need to hear, that joy and that true feeling of like openness and experience is something that sometimes feels closed off, and sometimes you can go for a long period of time when you're in a tough place of not feeling joy. And so I also have reflections on our increasingly tech kind of world, and whether that is bringing us joy, consumption of social media, and do you feel better afterwards, or do you feel worse when you're sort of seeing what everybody else is doing and feeling FOMO? And the last section is sort of the last section of the book is about meaning, and that was sort of the journey that the spiritual journey has brought me on, that a life of agency, being able to do what you want, is great. A life of joy and having great, wonderful experiences, but what's bringing you fulfillment? And I think that's working on something that it brings you meaning. And to me, meaning comes from service, from helping others, and that can be on whatever magnitude, even just being a committed partner in a relationship, raising your child, trying to lift up a community, any of those things. But what finding something in your life that brings meaning to your life, to me has sort of been an important part of my journey. So those are the things that the book's about.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really incredible, buddy, and I can't wait to read it. I mean, it sounds how far along are you?
I have completed the book. I worked with an editor on this, and what she endearably refers to as the shitty first draft.
I think that's the editors, like, that's their line, right?
That's where you start. And then I've been rewriting it for the last year or so. It took the first draft a year, rewriting it for the last year, and I've got like 2 chapters left. And then we'll see whether I self-publish or shop it around to publishers. But I want to just tell the story about what brought me to the book. Once again, crisis mode that we face at various junctures of our life. But after COVID hit and LaunchPad was sort of, not up and to the right, but down and to the right. And it was just like, I'm sure other people have had this experience, but the weekly Zoom calls where we're saying goodbye to colleagues and going through layoffs, and I felt like I spent 6 months talking to lawyers and trying to avoid lawsuits and dealing with landlords and just, but just dealing with a lot. And a lot of people have gone through that and been on that, been through that chapter of their lives. And so at one point, I just was feeling just extremely burned out. And I said to my wife, Anne, who is my partner in LaunchPad, and really we partner on almost everything we do. I just said, I'm feeling totally burned out. I would like nothing more than just to take a sabbatical and write a book. And she said, why don't you just do that and I'll run the business. So it was an incredible gift and extremely generous to give me that break. And that was the first time. That was, over 10 years of running LaunchPad, and the first time I'd really felt okay backing off. And I didn't like completely check out, but I definitely shifted my priorities and began writing and focusing on the book. And it was a gift, and gift of time and being able to focus on something else. And it's been wonderful.
Yeah. I don't want this to seem out of left field, but it's coming up as you're sort of talking about, LaunchPad winding down and some of the difficulties that you faced and things like that. And this has been on my mind recently just for other reasons, but how big of a part does forgiveness play in your life, like for yourself, for things that, may or may not have worked out the way that you thought that they would? And going back to entrepreneurship, I mean, how do you coach self-forgiveness for people?
I think it's extremely important. I think the ability to forgive yourself when you have a failure. I don't even know if business failures, it's not, you didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Most often, sometimes there's scenarios where you're out of integrity or unethical,
Sure.
but not talking about that.
Sure.
But I think that's a critical part of understanding that in life there's so many twists and turns and ups and downs, and being able to forgive yourself and forgive others. One of the things that that I find uncomfortable is it's more than finding discomfort in, but when I'm also an investor, and when somebody who has risked it all and started a startup and failed, when other investors are angry at this person or angry that they lost the money, and I think as an investor you have to have the recognition that as soon as you write that check, it could be gone tomorrow. That's the game you're playing. So unless there was some unethical business dealing or something, it's sort of an extreme case, being angry with a founder whose business is collapsing is sort of misplaced, I think. But I think forgiveness and grace along this journey is something we can all give ourselves more of and be giving to each other.
Yeah, beautiful, man. I appreciate that you shared like both sides, from like the business owner operator to also the investor side, because those are two very different hats to wear, and I know for myself, like even as Relay was unwinding, there were people that had, trusted me and believed in that vision and had, put money into the company. And I carried that psychological burden, emotional burden for like a really, really long time, because again, like I don't want to disappoint people. I don't want people to be angry with me, and And that process of forgiveness has taken a long time, you know, like it's still kind of like is in the back of my mind, like, oh, you fucked up at this point, or, you know, you could have done that better, you know, and it's just like, got to quiet that stuff down, man, and move forward.
You do. And I want to say to you that I thought Relay was incredible, and just everything you built and the brand and the feeling, and I love going in there, and I love bikes
Yeah.
and it is extremely hard to make a success of anything. And so yeah, I hope you'll
Offer myself
forgive
that forgiveness.
yourself and
Yeah, man.
offer yourself that
Yeah,
grace
yeah.
of
It's
it's okay, it's
mhm,
okay.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, man. So we'll kind of start landing the plane, but I just wanted to ask you, going back to, a couple of themes from Analog, what's bringing you the most joy in your life right now?
Being outside in nature,
Mm.
and my one of my greatest rituals right now is a weekly hike I go on with Anne.
Mm.
And we took this idea of being a little down in the dumps on Mondays. It's the start of the work week, and you may be low energy, or you certainly have a lot of stuff coming at you. And I sort of created this practice for us, which is we go on a weekly hike on Monday afternoons up at Lake Sonoma. When we're here, if we're in Mexico, we have a hike we do. And what it's done for me is I actually really look forward to Mondays now, and
Wow.
which is weird, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's but it if you can incorporate this in your life, whether this works for you or something else, but this idea of sort of taking something, we get in and answer the emails that that are urgent, and kind of deal with what's urgent, but then basically Monday afternoon go head out on this hike, and we use it very strategically. We think about, Anne's very strategic, she helps me sort of think about what we're going to do that week. We think about our intention that we want to set with our family that week, with our daughter, and it's one of the things in my life that brings me the greatest joy right now.
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful because it's all three things, right? Like you're taking agency over your life, and this hike is sacred, right? It
Right.
does bring you joy, and there's meaning in that connection. Like it builds deep meaning into your relationship, into how you show up as a father and as a leader, and as a husband, all of that, man. Community member.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It provides all of that. And I'm, this is, if anybody were to say, hey, where's Chris, during, 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock, this is the old, you read it all the time in business books, like block off your strategic planning time, just put a place on your calendar that you're not available. But you don't have to go sit in a conference room, or go on a beautiful hike out in nature, and make it something really worthwhile.
That's super insightful, man. And I think, as we were talking about this feeling of separation from joy, right? Like which life tends to kind of like try to drive a wedge between us and happiness. It doesn't have to be this grand gesture, right? Like for me, it could be petting my dog, or having a conversation with my son, or going for a bike ride. I mean, it's not impossible to move yourself closer to a regular experience of joy and fulfillment and agency and meaning and all of those things.
Well said. Well
Yeah.
said. And it's a step-by-step thing, but the best thing to do is to start doing something for yourself along those lines. When you can create that space in your life.
Yeah. Well, man, I just wanted to say how great this has been catching up with you. Like I miss you. I'm so proud of like the life you're creating for yourself. Like it's incredible, dude.
Well, thank you so much, Wes. And the same goes for you. I've
Thank you,
been
man.
listening to your podcasts and watching what you're doing, and it is really cool. And it's cool to watch all of us, grow and
Yeah.
evolve and the journey that everybody's on. So
Yeah.
it is really nice to reconnect here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to sort of set the intention that when the book is ready to be distributed, man, I would love to get a copy, read it, and then circle back and have another conversation around analog, man, if you're up for it.
I would love to. That would be absolutely. I'll definitely put you on the list to get a copy and come
Beautiful.
back on and we can talk in more depth about analog.
Awesome, man. Well, Chris, it's so great seeing you. I hope you have an incredible rest of your week, brother.
Thank you. Great to be with you today.
For sure. We'll see you soon. That's it for this episode of This Life Without Limits. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and will join me again for future episodes. If you want to stay updated on new releases, hit the subscribe button below, and don't forget to check out the show notes for additional details and links. I'd also love to hear what you think about the content of this episode, so please feel welcome to drop any comments, thoughts, questions, critique, any of that below. Thanks again for joining me, and I look forward to next time. Until then, here's to a life without limits, my friends.